the 20 years, 1950 to 1970, was a time when the immigrant remade Ireland.
I came here looking for a living, whether it was work or robbing, but I done one or the other. I went to school. I went to all the schools. I was born an orphan. I got raised up by a family. I went to a place called Rathdrum in County Wicklow. From there I got transferred to Artane. That was in 1941. And I stopped there to 1949. And it was a very cruel regime. The brothers and the priests were horrible, which at the time people didn't believe. It never came under exposure. But since then, it has come under exposure in the last few years. The cruelty and the thing. I was never sexually abused, but I was physically abused. Because I wouldn't stand any, nonsense off them. And they're trying to get the best of you. They hit you harder and harder. They didn't make things easy for you. And the only people they picked on was weaklings and people with disabilities and people that couldn't stand up for themselves. I got the claim for being in the school. I should not have been in them schools.
They brought a man over from Rome, 90-odd years of age, to tell me I was telling lies. That I wasn't beaten for an hour, non-stop, by two of them. By two of them, non-stop, from head to toe, without a shred of cloth on my body. My God, Minister, and could I speak to you and ask your leader, would you stop making a political football of this? You hurt us when you do that. You tear the shreds from inside our body. For God's sake, try and give us some peace. Try and give us some peace and not to continue hurting us. That woman will tell you how many times I jump out of the bed at night with the sweat pumping out of me because I see these fellas at the end of the bed with their fingers doing that to me and pulling me into the room to rape me, to bugger me and bait the shite out of me.
But they call it Holy Ireland. I didn't think it was Holy Ireland. The only thing was Holy in Ireland was the holes in the road.
The fear of God, the religion was fear of God. It was the fear of God. And I rebelled against it all the time. Not only me, there was plenty like me.
I wonder, is it fate or is it like something that was the nuns just
drummed into you?
I think
drummed into you?
If you can get the spirit world on your side, you're better off having them on your side than not.
Definitely.
Because this is a tough world.
Yeah.
One of the terrible things about any religion is when it begins to offer you things that it cannot possibly provide you with, because then you're going to have a terrible sense of disappointment and humbug about it.
I was lucky to survive. I was always an easygoing fella, a likable fella, like to laugh, and that's what keeps me going. But when you that night, said you're fucking bad. Well, you would have that last night. I never slept there. He slept there.
You would have all these Galway men originally.
10 to 6pence. End up in Liverpool. Made me way down in Liverpool down to Huddersfield to Manchester, shoplifting all the way down to London. I ended up in London 54. I've been here ever since.
Victoria Park Road, there was a house, big sign in the window, no Irish, no blacks, need apply.
In England, English life, as indeed all urban life, whether it's English or American, is atomized life. What you live as an atomized individual, not as a member of a family, but as an atomized individual in a bedsitter.
I think drink was an escape from frustrations, from a sense of helplessness, a sense of inferiority, a sense of disempowerment that arises out of the colonial system. And of course in Britain, that sense of inferiority was exacerbated, I suppose, by direct encounters with the wider society, and it in turn could be escaped by the company of your own in the pubs.
Okay, I never drank this 24, and I had, before I was 24 years of age, I must have about 20 convictions for being drunk, and I never drank. Just because I was an Irishman, in the wrong place at the wrong time. The pub was your life. You either meet in a cafe or an old rock and roll cafe, or you spent your life in pubs with other fellow Irishmen. And they were really, police were really anti-Irish. Friday night, kick the paddy night, they call it. That means pub was packed with our Irishmen, the wage packers, we robbed them. Bring them in the station and rob them. Which it did happen. I was in jail up to I was in jail until I was 38 years of age. I got 3 months off the judge in Clerkenwell in the 50s, and I said, I'll do that on my year. That's an old Irish saying. When he said, there's another 3 months doing your other year, it was so funny. The prisons were tough, but I was never afraid of parts. I was one of them fellas who'd done the time and done it.
Steve, in Camden, all the Irish used to meet in Camden. The pubs was packed. Camden Town was the best place anyone could meet from any part of Ireland.
Kentish Town.
And the police,
Frecklewood.
As soon as the pub closed and they went out, you couldn't have a chat. They had the vans there, and if you didn't move along, they'd fire you in. There was just an excuse to get money.
On the Thursday night and Friday night in Kilburn, and the paddies got paid. And with the punch up, it started in Kilburn High Road. And then Paddy's taxi arrived, the Black Maria, and we'd shout, give us back to 6 counties and we'll give you back Camden Town, as we were going to fight with the police. And if we didn't have a good punch up on a third night or Friday night, it was a bad week.
And it's called the genesis of Irish macho. Partly because of that separation of the gender. Violence was accepted. Violence was something that Irish men did. Wherever the fighting Irish, men internalised that. Kind of a feeling that they didn't really care about the body. They didn't care what kind of things happened to them. If we don't care about ourselves, if we take a risk, if we will go on a building site, for instance, with no helmet, no proper clothing, if we will drink ourselves into the ground, if we have no care for these things, it tells other people, well, we're cavalier people, we're not petty people. We like that idea. Irish males particularly like that idea. And of course you're separating yourself from the other gender, which is the caring element in Ireland, female care. So all these men had mothers. And these mothers were very important to making them the kind of men they are. I'm not blaming the mothers for it, but I'm just saying it's that separation of the two genders, making women into total carers and men into total non-carers, became part of it.
The conditions were the conditions were terrible. People, the clothes you wore, that's the clothes you went to bed with. And where you put your head down for the night. If you wanted a day's walk, you had to meet outside Camden Town Tube Station. That's where it's based. At 6 o'clock in the morning, out Essex on a cold back of a coal lorry. And at the end of the day, they give you about £2. You go into a cafe, get a meal, have a few drinks. You get into a cold room or a cold derelict house.
I understood the spirit of rebelliousness, the spirit of the love of freedom that the navvies particularly carried with them all through their lives. The navvies didn't unionise, they didn't see their power in collective bargaining. They saw their power in walking off the site and down the road if they didn't like the conditions or they thought the ganger man was being a bollocks. They'd walk away.
When you damp down, you paid $50 a night.
Yeah.
And if you damp down, you got fucking barred. You boot in, you got a wet bed. You've done a slash in the bed last night, you're barred.
Yeah.
A lot of people are caught in this kind of halfway stage. They've never successfully put down roots in this country, and they've never given up the thought of going back. But the actual route back is very difficult psychologically. Because they haven't really made the success that they set out to do. And this has become a syndrome within the Irish community abroad, which hasn't really affected a lot of other immigrants to Britain.
And they didn't go back. They didn't want to go back to Ireland as a failure. They didn't go back. 50 years in England. What have you got to show for it? An old bike with a pair of clippers.
Somehow their sense that they were ejected leaves them with a feeling of bitterness, regret obviously, but bitterness more importantly, and then the reluctance to extrapolate from that and look at their own personal family situations, you know, under that microscope and ask why. And then the sense of placelessness, which of course applies to their not belonging back in Ireland and simultaneously not belonging in the country in which they've made their lives and are anticipating dying, and is coming to terms with that.
So you see Irishmen in pubs, they have a few drinks. What's the first thing they do? They sing an old rebel song about their own country, and about next day, what did I do last night? They were singing our rebel songs. Then what makes them do that? The drink brings the softness out in them. They're always singing about their country, aren't they? There's not an Irishman that I know that doesn't love his country.
You remember that? I remember Dublin City in the rare old time. The John Dempsey has Dublin out to me. Remember that? I remember Dublin